I'm going to talk obviously about St. Francis, about the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, and hopefully make those two meet because I was really challenged with this one. So I began preparing for my pilgrimage to Santiago earlier this year and became very excited when I learned that 2014 had been declared the 800th anniversary of St. Francis of Assisi walking to Santiago. And I thought this was really exciting because it gave me the opportunity to combine two of my research interests, pilgrimage and St. Francis. This year, a very special Compostela, or certificate of completion, was going to be issued by the Franciscans in honor of this anniversary. And there was promises of exhibits, postage stamps, and many other events marking the occasion. So I assumed that along this journey that there were going to be significant markers and signs pointing pilgrims to designated Franciscan sacred spaces and places. So I figured this was going to be a really rich opportunity to learn something about St. Francis that I really didn't know anything at all about. I discovered along the route that there was the occasional monastery, there was a church or a convent that was run by the Franciscan friars or nuns, clearly very old, obviously Franciscan, but rather sketchy in detail regarding whether or not Francis had anything directly to do with it, whether he really established the community. What I came to discover that my search for Francis in Spain was unfolding more like a George Washington slept here scenario, making it exceedingly difficult to discern whether or not there was truth to these rumors that Francis actually did this pilgrimage to Santiago. Francis's first two biographers, Thomas of Celano and St. Bonaventure, are actually very silent about this pilgrimage. The first mention of it appears in a text that was translated from a 14th century text called The Little Flowers of St. Francis. A very fleeting notation, and its mention seems more like an opportunity for the author to establish that Francis has this revelation from God to go to Galatia, this area in northwestern Spain, and establish convents and communities there. Whether he did himself or not is rather questionable. And I think what I came to discover is it's not so important. There are a lot of stories that mention Francis to going to Santiago, but that's all they say. He went to Santiago. He established something. But beyond that, there's really very little hard evidence that supports any of these claims. Probably one of the greatest stories is found within the city of Santiago itself. There's a convent of St. Francis that's rumored to have been established by him. And according to the story, when Francis goes to Santiago in 1214, he receives a vision from the apostle of St. James to build a monastery. So he meets a coal merchant. He and this merchant, sort of broker this deal. Francis says, "You're going to build this monastery for me." The poor guy has no idea what he's talking about. He's not a builder. He's very poor. He doesn't have the resources. So they take a walk, and lo and behold, they come to this plot of land, which isn't really very far from the actual Cathedral of St. James itself. And Francis tells this guy to dig a hole. He digs a hole, and guess what? He finds a basket of gold. So now we've got the money to build a monastery. It's really nice how these things always work out for Francis. They then go, because this piece of land is on a monastery that's owned by another religious order. Francis goes to the abbot, who agrees to hand the land over to him in exchange for an annual basket of fish. And I don't know, this just really smacks of another story I know about Francis and the renting of the Portiuncula in Assisi, where Francis brokers this deal with the Benedictines for an annual donation of fish. So perhaps, Brother Bill, this is where you need to start going. Baskets of fish. There's probably something to this particular story, as there is an archival document dated from the 1700s that is issued by the Franciscans for the delivery of a basket of fish. But sometimes I think maybe a delivery of fish is just a delivery of fish. That's it. So they established this monastery. There's very little that remains of this 13th century church, but apparently you will find the tomb of this, well, not apparently, you will, find the tomb of this coal merchant, and there's still some remains of the cloisters, which is shared by the present basilica and a very lovely 4-star hotel, I might add, which I had the privilege of staying in when I got there. So where does this leave us? You know, we can think about the stories and we can wonder what the fuss is all about and wonder how is that relevant to us. It could, on the one hand, be a marvelously genius marketing campaign to help the economically challenged country of Spain. You know, we're capitalizing on a very popular saint and a very an interesting pilgrimage route that has really seen a resurging interest. Some historians believe that Francis actually did go to Spain with the intent of reaching out to the Muslim community, suggesting then that the pilgrimage actually wasn't his primary goal. There is some indication that he walked across southern France, crossing the Pyrenees. Some think he might have sailed across the Mediterranean, however. Some people just think he never even went to Spain. So we've got a lot of different theories going on. But I think the more important question isn't whether Francis actually does go to Santiago, but rather, what about this Franciscan spirit that you can find along the Camino? What is it about this particular pilgrimage that somehow attracted the Franciscan movement and continues to attract people of religious traditions from all around the world every year? So the story of the Camino de Santiago again begins with another lovely Christian legend. So after Christ is crucified, St. James, his apostle, sails to Galatia and begins his ministry of preaching and conversion. Many people assume that this particular location was chosen because of the importance of a coastal area known as Finisterre on the coast of Galatia, which was believed to be, and is translated actually as the end of the world. This destination was considered to be a magical destination for the ancient Celts because they believed that paradise actually existed beyond the horizon. What frequently happens in Christianity is the Christians find these kind of areas and go there to transplant and impose their own particular message. Apparently when St. James gets there, he's greeted rather coolly and has very little success in his evangelization efforts there. He goes back to Jerusalem only to be beheaded by Herod in 44. The story tells us that his followers take his body to a port where they found a boat made of stone, and it was guarded by an angel waiting for them. The boat transports the body of the saint miraculously back to the Iberian Peninsula, landing in northwestern Spain, and his followers take his body to a hillside about 23 kilometers north. It's buried, undiscovered for 800 years. About the year 800, a hermit has this vision of these a bright star surrounded by smaller bright stars, pointing to this particular spot. And they go and dig up the body. The bishop investigates, sees the tomb, declares it to be the body of St. James, and they proclaim, King Alfonso proclaims him to be the patron saint of Spain, and they erect this cathedral. So this vision becomes known as, because of what the hermit sees, as the Field of Stars, which later translates to Compostela. News of this discovery, you know, quickly spreads, and the pilgrimage to Santiago begins as a result of this. It sort of becomes even more important in the 12th century when Pope Alexander III declares it to be the Jacobean Holy Year. And this is where we think maybe Francis might have taken this trip because of its popularity to Santiago, because of the popularity as a pilgrimage destination. At this point, the Pope declares that all Catholics who make this pilgrimage to Santiago are going to receive a plenary indulgence, meaning their time in purgatory would be reduced or eliminated. This is, of course, as if you make it there alive. So it was and still to this day is considered to be one of the most important and popular pilgrimages in Christianity, and it ranks right up there with going to Rome or Jerusalem. In 1987, it was declared the first European cultural route by the Council of Europe. There is an 800-kilometer route that sort of begins either right at the border of Spain and France or right over the border in France in the Pyrenees. It's called the Camino Francés, and it's probably the most popular known route. It's in fact, the Camino is actually a network of routes that start in different places in Spain and Portugal and even distant points in France and Germany. Technically, when a person begins a pilgrimage, you begin your pilgrimage the second you walk out your door. It's kind of hard for people who live anywhere outside of continental Europe to begin walking from that point, but there it is. So what about this idea of pilgrimage? Pilgrimage is usually a journey of faith to a sacred place. In this case, to the cathedral in Santiago, where we think the body of St. James is buried. Pilgrimage is also considered to be a journey of relationship, connection, there's intent, and there's meaning in this travel. For many people, a pilgrimage can be very dangerous and demanding. For some, it could be the very last act they ever perform in their lives. The effects of a pilgrimage are intended to be both spiritual as well as physical. So there's a lot of meaning in the movement, as it's often an excursion that's going to test the limits of the pilgrim, and there's deep meaning in the destination as well. As I said, it's usually a site that's sacred to a particular religious tradition. So pilgrimage is something that is common within all religious faiths. And there are many different reasons why someone might undertake such a journey. Some pilgrims are looking for solace, renewal, redemption, healing. Some are looking for guidance in their lives, their careers, their vocations. Some just want an adventure or a really cheap holiday. Others are looking for more profound things like salvation, some kind of encounter with the divine. They're performing acts of thanksgiving, or they're fulfilling some sort of religious obligation. The obstacles, the pain, the hunger, and the fatigue, the idea is will give way and break through to joy, satisfaction, sleep sometimes. Even when the circumstances, the food, the experiences are far from what you've become accustomed to. So when we think about these reasons, I don't think I'm stretching the truth when I say that all of these probably would have been very compelling motives for St. Francis to have taken a very long walk towards a meaningful and very sacred destination. Many who undergo these pilgrimages do so in response to some sort of divine call. Again, I think we can find Francis in this as someone who was always responding to God, responding to other humans, responding to creation. The journey is time spent listening, healing, hearing, answering the voice of God. It's a participation in a very ancient and profound revelatory relationship between the divine and the human. Sometimes there's a very acute awareness of this call on the part of the pilgrim. Other times it's only an understanding that I've got to do something. I've got to do something because I need to make a change. So no matter what that pull or the aim is, whether it's very obvious or hidden, pilgrimage allows the seeker to journey inward in order to reclaim or renew a relationship with the divine. Along the path, the focus is your destination, but the experience of the movement, the spiritual discernment process, allows the pilgrim to discover something of themselves and the divine along and within the walking. So people move and pray as pilgrims in order to understand and be potentially transformed through some kind of sacramental experience, not just with the divine, but with others as well, with encounters with the environment, and ultimately with that of the sacred, whether it's out there or within yourself, whoever that sacred might be for a particular believer. So there's openness to discovery, movement towards the center, and that to which the human feels the need to belong offers us integration, healing, wholeness within the spirit and within the body. So while pilgrimage is this outward journey, it's also a very inner one, an experience that's far more challenging sometimes than the actual physical walk. So when we talk about pilgrimage, especially when we want to consider the pilgrimage of a great religious figure like St. Francis of Assisi, I might invite you to think about two metaphors. The labyrinth, the idea of the labyrinth, and a hero's journey. The labyrinth is a very ancient symbol for a way of life. You leave the old, you set off for the new, you go into the labyrinth in search of meaning. And there are some moments along the way where you seem to have found it, and other times when you're lost, you're even farther away than you were. Totally, totally lost. And when you find the new meaning, it's believed that's when you actually touch the core of the labyrinth. But then you have to find your way out. You have to search for new ways to shape your daily life according to your newly discovered meanings, for yourself and for the others in your life. And you have to keep doing this over and over and over again. If you've ever walked in a labyrinth or been in one of those corn mazes, you know how disconcerting that can be. And I think about Francis once more and the fervor with which he worked to make his world a better place. He lived his life walking a labyrinth, and he's the hero in this story making the journey. He was challenged by God to step out of his everyday, very comfortable life and fulfill an important mission. Go rebuild my church, Francis. And he discovers the extraordinary in his very ordinary life. As Father Haran mentioned yesterday in his lecture, Francis wasn't born a saint. He was just a regular guy who responds to a call and struggled throughout his life to live in love and service to others. So when we think about stories about heroes too, they very often have very happy endings. It's probably why we like listening to them. In the case of Francis, he's a very appealing character because he's that guy. He's the guy who seems to have done superhuman things under duress with mayhem all around him. He devotes himself to the marginalized and the oppressed in society. He goes to meet with the Sultan. Neither of those things were really smart decisions because they were both pretty life-threatening. But he does this because he feels it's important. He's called and he needs to respond. So this is a story with a happy ending, and we like these stories, probably because in our normal, ordinary lives, the happy ending isn't such a certainty. Most of us, because of this, choose to live very safe lives, and we live very cautiously. We like to stay at home, we like to be in our comfort zones, or when we do go out on an adventure, we take home with us. I saw this on the Camino, not just in other people, but really in myself. There were people with very heavy backpacks or bike bags that were stuffed to the brim with items for the, well, just in case, or what if this happens, I got this going on. There were luggage transport services, there were taxis if the road became too difficult. Just about everybody, myself included, had a phone and was sending messages or receiving texts and emails because you didn't want to let go of those connections that you had with home or the familiar. There were some people who planned every single day of their pilgrimage because they didn't want to give in to the unknown. All this endless planning and preparation ahead of time, you were sort of looking for solutions to anticipated problems, which in reality probably never occurred or just eventually solved themselves. Now, I'm not being judgmental, despite those of you who know me are thinking right now. Okay? There can be perfectly good reasons to do any or all of the above at any given time. And sometimes what's really a great challenge for one person is a very easy and effortless task for another person. One pilgrim might be, just recovering from a serious illness. Another is in the prime of her life. But there's something that challenges everybody on that road. And the idea is you face that road head on, you expand your boundaries, and you become the hero of your own personal story. It's great. Like you're a star in your own little movie that's playing the tape in your head. So I came to a few conclusions about this, beginning with the idea of moving towards and entering a labyrinth. Whatever that might be metaphorically or literally in your life, you meet the challenge. But don't forget, you got to get out of that labyrinth too once you get in. And that's the point in the story when Francis hears God say, "Go rebuild my church." And that's when each of us discovers a new insight or makes an important decision. Then, to get out of the labyrinth, you have to share it with other people. And that, I think, is what really gives meaning to a pilgrimage. And you've probably all heard the expression, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I think pilgrimage really is an illustration of that. So on the Camino, when you finally arrive in the city of Santiago, the pilgrim's office is there issuing these real certificates. Because, we always like to be rewarded for everything that we do. And this Compostela is there. And that's when everybody pats you on the back. Well done, you did it. You walked the entire way, you biked the entire way, whatever that entire way might be for you. You only have to walk 100 kilometers or bike 200 kilometers to get that Compostela at the end. And that seems to be the end of your journey. But that's really not it. When you arrive in Santiago, remember we're moving in the labyrinth, you're only really halfway there. The challenge then becomes bringing that experience, those lessons, your insights, your decisions, bringing them back home, bringing them back out. So the next step is you have to leave those yellow arrows and markers that guide you all along that route, those signs, and give the pilgrimage a personal meaning that enriches your life at home and your relationship with other people. So a pilgrimage offers people time and space. Time and space to attend to relationships with other people and that other, that divine, that ultimate reality, whoever that might be. And I kind of discovered that by kind of putting myself, that other, and others into this unifying mix stew of the pilgrimage. And here's some of the things that I learned about relationships as I walked for 4 weeks. I had plenty of time to think and space to do a lot of thinking and talking. And when I say I learned these things, I did not master any of them. They came to mind, I thought about them, and I'm probably still going to be working on them for a very long time. But when you go on the road, it means to live with a lot of uncertainty and to understand there's a lot of value in letting go of all those old uncertainties that you have. And that's when you can really start to do some work. And that's when you're able to open yourself up to other people, to that other divinity, whatever it is. And I lived with a great deal of uncertainty for 4 weeks. Whether it was a question of, will I make it over that next mountain? And that was a daily uncertainty for me. Am I going to get hurt? Am I going to get lost? I actually did get lost. Am I going to find a place to stay? Will there be people to talk to? Will there be an ATM machine in the next town? You know, I don't have any money right now. How about washing clothes? Will I be able to get myself understood in my rudimentary French, Spanish, German? You know, will I die? Every now and then, that wasn't an unreasonable question. There was a lot of uncertainty every single day. It also meant that I had to trust, based on this uncertainty, that everything was going to turn out okay. That's not a really easy thing for me because I tend, again, those of you who know me, I tend to worry. I like to be in control. I like to be in command of things. And I have issues with trust, mainly in my own abilities. So trusting that things were going to turn out well on the Camino is often, you know, it happened in a very different way than I imagined. Things turning out well often meant I got a bed that night and I was able to have a shower. The bed, however, more often than not, was next to a half-naked man who was snoring. And the shower was water in some form of another, sometimes with my clothes on, sometimes freezing, sometimes no pressure. But these were kind of important lessons. I'm still figuring them out. I don't know if I want to go through them again, but they were important. Another thing I discovered was how easy and wonderful it was to only have a few belongings. To not read the newspaper or really see much television was really freeing, because I like to know what's going on in the world. And I became pretty much oblivious to the things that tend to clog up my everyday life. I was leading a pretty simple life, and I discovered kind of enjoying it. There was less stuff, there was less hassle, there was less to worry about, there was more to enjoy. I think I was developing as a human. I was learning about myself. I learned about my limitations, my weaknesses. One of those weaknesses I discovered came in the form of a daily beer at 10 a.m. every morning. I learned about my strengths, my resilience, and I learned how to kind of calm down and be peaceful. I discovered I was able to spend time thinking about my relationships here at home, cultivating the relationships that I made on the pilgrimage, and spend some really good quality time with my very underutilized and under-challenged spiritual side. Going on pilgrimage meant traveling light, little to no consumption, understanding what it means to be in relation not only with other humans, but the non-humans and the elements. Now, I haven't gone all Woodstock and hippie on you. I'm not running to join the nearest convent or anything, but I think the time really offered me the opportunity to think about the conspicuous consumption that we're frequently engaged in here in the States. We have people constantly telling us what we need, what we want, often at the expense of other people who aren't paid a fair wage or who work in inhumane conditions. We have excessiveness in our diets and our lifestyles. And if we live only with what we need, our footprints become smaller and there's more to go around. See, I become dangerous and kind of crazy when I walk alone too. The other idea is the pilgrim as a stranger. The word pilgrim actually comes from a Latin word peregrinus, which means stranger. Most pilgrims travel as strangers in other countries or regions. And they really get to experience what that word means, especially when you travel light, so you become more dependent on and open to other people along the way. And there's that whole image of Francis again and what he was doing. As a stranger, you can feel much more strongly how important the concept of hospitality is and what it means to feel really welcome. There's nothing like walking into a bar and having the person behind the counter offer you a drink, offer you something to eat, and then give you more than what you ordered for no additional charge. It's a very humbling experience at the end of a very hot day. The first thing that happens to you is when you get into your albergue is someone gives you a cup of tea, shows you your bed, shows you where the shower is, and when you start pulling out your euros, they say, just get yourself cleaned up, take a rest, we'll deal with all that later. You know, have something to eat, come back later. Hospitality is being with people who share their stuff, share their expertise, share their stories. It's watching other people tend to the wounds and blisters of total strangers, or being met in the village by a person you just met that morning, you barely know who they are, and they're sitting there waiting for you, and they bought you lunch and a beer, and they're patiently waiting for you to arrive in town. So after walking the Camino, it's really hard to look at strangers here at home with the same eyes. I learned that I could do more than I thought or I believed I could do. You know, it's been quite a while since I would just run up rocks for fun, you know, or share spaces with total strangers in close quarters. So pushing myself felt really, physically really good when it wasn't feeling really, really awful, which was a lot of the time. It's not easy. Your back hurts, your shoulders, your knees, your hips, your legs, everything gets sore at different times. There were days where you could see a town in the distance, or you read it, this was frequently, the next town is 2 kilometers away. We started to refer to those as Spanish kilometers because I don't think the Spaniards have the same idea of what 2 kilometers is for the rest of Europe. It seemed like you were never going to get there to the next stop, but all you could do was either sit down, which was just going to make it longer, or keep walking. And every day you were amazed by what you were able to accomplish, not just in terms of the ground that you covered. I don't think anyone can ever forget if they take this experience. You tell someone you took a month off from work and spent it with a backpack walking 800 kilometers across Spain, and people, it's really kind of cool. They're like, what? Every time it happens, I think to myself, you can't believe I did it? I still can't believe I did it. Another thing I discovered about that pain is that it really does remind you that you're alive. There were a couple of points along the way I'd suffered some pain, occasional blisters, a little knee pain, I sunburn. And while trying to deal with it, I would think that this pain is a very real indication that I'm still here. I haven't died yet. And there were days where dying was almost an attractive, alternative, especially when you saw that next mountain coming along. But it was a good reminder that I was alive, and I tried to look at it it wasn't such a debilitating way. It didn't always work, but sometimes it worked. I also came to the conclusion that on occasion I do like other people. I like being alone, but I was able to find a balance between being alone and being in the company of others. In daily life, people are often the source of my problems. I'm not the problem, they are. But they're in your way on the subway, they annoy me at work or in the classroom. None of you. Just everybody else. People walk down the sideway, they take up the whole sidewalk. Or, they get on the elevator and they ride up one floor. And I say, please, just, you need to get a life. Put yourself in perspective. But having my ego reduced by walking, just like everyone else, was very good for me. And it's also very humbling when, like me, you're one of the slower people walking. I learned it wasn't a race. I wasn't going to get a prize. And that was really hard because I like getting prizes. Okay? But I came to understand that I was doing this just for me. And after a few days, because I was moving so slowly, my head started to slow down too. And I started to listen to other people. I started to talking to other people, very guardedly at first. And then, I started to actually enjoy it. I took the time to listen, have conversations, listen to their whole story instead of just saying, just give me the highlights, I got things to do right now, just tell me what you need, I waited till they were finished. And I didn't wait till they were finished because then it was going to be my turn. I just really enjoyed hearing what they had to say and realizing that what I had to say really didn't make a difference at all. Sometimes I liked being part of a group, and I don't usually admit to that because, as I said, I like to be alone. But being subject to group decisions sometimes really drives me to distraction and can be quite irritating, probably because I like to be the boss, But I found myself to be part of a couple of groups every now and then, and things just happen. So, where are you going to stop tomorrow? Do you want to join us for dinner tonight? Do you want to cook dinner with us tonight? And I also recognized that when I said yes, that was great, but when I said no, I don't want to, that was also okay. And very few people took it personally. So it was kind of great not worrying about what other people thought. It was actually very liberating. I also came to the conclusion that most people are very likable. People that I never would have imagined I would have liked. Now, there are still people that annoyed and irritated me. I didn't turn into Mother Teresa, But most people were nice, And it was also one of the first times in my life where I realized that there are still people along the road that were going to drive me crazy. The way they said things, the things that they did, their attitudes. And what I realized, that's not their problem. God bless you. It's my problem. It would be nice if they changed to accommodate me, but I'm really the one with the problem. I also discovered that people really care, and they care a lot. One morning a car stopped because I was walking the wrong way. A farmer kept yelling at me and waving to me, and I'm just like, hey, how you doing? It's great. And I thought she was just saying hello. I finally realized she was telling me the road was going up the mountain, not around the mountain. I think it was just wishful thinking on my part. One day when I was leaving Pamplona in the middle of the running of the bulls, and there were a lot of people and there was a lot of mayhem, and you couldn't see the little markers on the ground, this elderly gentleman saw me standing there, and he took me by the hand and he walked me across the street and walked me a little while and just said, just keep going that way, you're going to be fine. I I missed an arrow one day. That's the day I got lost, and I ended up walking down a highway instead of a nice bucolic path. And I thought that was the end, and I didn't even think I was going to get to where I needed to go. And when I finally got there, I met one of my acquaintances who, you know, I had met him the day before, and he acted like I just came back from a war. I saw food and beverages left by the side of the road, people with signs saying, "Help yourselves." A lot of the albergues that you stayed in were run by volunteers, and they were for donation only. So I think you see many instances of caring that I never really noticed in my normal environment. I also learned that it's okay to cry, and I tend not to cry very much, and I certainly don't cry in public. But every now and then I'd be walking along having a really great day, and I'd be moved to tears for no apparent or rational reason. I mean, it's a little embarrassing to admit it, but whatever. It's hard not to be moved by tears when you're surrounded by such natural beauty and you have the opportunity to really deeply experience it. Or because you're really moved by someone unburdening their troubles to you, absolutely trusting you with whatever they're suffering with. I also learned that it's nice to share. It's like I went back to kindergarten or something, you know? I always feel like these things are mine, that's what I feel like every day, and I don't want anybody to take away my stuff. And on the Camino, you just kind of share. You share Band-Aids, you share threads, you share money, you share food. And other people shared with me. And this need to grasp and hold on really started to ease up and evaporate. And I also discovered that I need less than I think I need. I sit here in this lovely college home with my many toys around me. Some of them are very expensive. Some of them hardly been used because, as my daughter says, it's like casting pearls before swine. You don't know how to use any of it, you know? But when I buy them, it's very important to buy them. But I've learned that as soon as I buy something, there's something else coming down the line that you need more than that. You know, and I talk about this with my students all the time, but I'm a card-carrying, you know, consumer. I walked with 3 pairs of socks, 3 pairs of underwear, 2 t-shirts, a long sleeve shirt, 2 pairs of shorts, a pair of pants, a jacket, a towel, my sleeping bag, and I really had little more than that. I went a full month without having to buy things to add to my ever-growing collection of stuff, because I also realized anything I bought I would have to carry. So it really made me think very deeply about how much I need. And if I have something I don't need, can't I find a useful home for it? There are many pilgrims who are very much aware of what they call the magic of the Camino, even before they set out. This road is very rich with history, going back, as I said, to the time of the Celts. Millions of people have walked this journey in more than 1,000 years. And you read or hear about these miracles or special experiences. And all of these things mean that many people begin this journey with a very special mindset. And the idea is if we all give something special importance, then maybe it becomes a reality. Pilgrimage on the Camino is a very wonderful experience, and I think that metaphor of the labyrinth and the hero helps to describe and explain it. The legend that Francis walked it only makes it, at least for me, a richer and more powerful story. Many people I spoke with once we got to Santiago, and many of those I met along the way and I still keep in touch with, have said to me, "Don't you wish your normal life was more like it was on the Camino?" And I think about that a lot as well. But in some ways I think that's the mission of being a pilgrim. You bring home the experiences of the journey, and that's what gives shape to your everyday life. And I think that's one of the best lessons of the Camino and the idea of Francis walking it. Making something as ordinary and profane as taking a simple walk into something extraordinary and sacred. It's practical, it's putting your spirituality, whatever that might be, into the practice of your everyday life. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get to that center of the labyrinth and you're never going to be able to come home. Thank you.